I don't have a personal experience with that myself. I have never been clinically diagnosed. I've never been on medication. So that isn't something that I can speak a lot about because I don't have experience in it. Some people have a traumatic event, which could be anything from something violent happening in their life, the death of a loved one or a friend, or even moving from one state and leaving everything you know somewhere else. There's all sorts of different triggers that can happen for depression, and so keep that in mind when you talk with people. One of the things I want to do tonight is to bring some hope and hopefully some understanding, because I mean, statistically, you may not have ever had suicidal thoughts or struggled with depression, but I guarantee you in your lifetime you will encounter someone who does. I guarantee you all have, because I'm standing here and you've all met me, so there you go. You've all encountered somebody, and statistically, a lot of you in here would fall into that category, and you may not be open about it, but it's there. So, sorry, it's just like right in my face and it's okay. So first I'm going to give you guys a little bit of my background and my personal story and struggle in depression and suicidal thoughts. When I was younger, change the page real quick. My parents, my mom left when I was 10 months old. Her and my dad had an interesting relationship, and her best friend at the time lived with them, so the three of them lived together, and she left, and then her best friend started dating my dad. And I kind of grew up in that environment. There was a lot of drugs involved in my parents' lifestyle. There was a lot of abuse, and eventually she became kind of like a stepmom, but they never got married. She moved out, they broke up, and my dad married another woman who was on top of drugs, was also involved with alcohol, and she was physically abusive towards me. There was neglect, abuse. I also had two different neighbors on 2 different occasions sexually assault me before I was 6 years old. So I had traumatic events. When I was 10, I kind of decided to start acting out on those and trying to become a little bit more obvious that there was something going on. And I decided when I was 10 that I was going to kill myself. I grew up in California, and I grew up in a city called Pico Rivera, and I was, and I'm not kidding you, the only Caucasian girl in the entire school. The only one. Everyone else was Hispanic. And so I was bullied, not to the extent that you guys see nowadays. I almost feel bad using the word bully, but I was pushed in the hallways, notes stuck on my back, all sorts of Spanish names that I won't repeat here were said to me and about me and things like that. So I was the girl that everyone picked on in school. And so I decided that the best place to do this would be at school during recess. I was 10. So I was still a child, and I didn't fully understand. Well, actually, let me go back a little bit. That was my first official planning, I'm going to do this. But before then, I remember being 7 years old, and my dad was watching TV, and there was some movie, I couldn't tell you what movie it was, and I just remember there was a woman, and I think she was Japanese, I'm not sure, and she was kneeling down. Something had happened, and her family had told her it was honorable for her to take her own life. And so she had taken a sword and she had plunged it into her chest. And when I saw that, I thought, well, that's what I need to do. I need to help my parents out by removing the problem, which was me. That's what I believed, that I was their problem. My dad didn't want to have children. He had a rare eye disease, and my mom tricked him and told him that she was on birth control, and then when she was 4 months pregnant said, oh, oops, I wasn't, just kidding, we're having a baby. And my dad had been very vocal about the fact that he did not want to have children. And so I took that to mean that I was a mistake and I wasn't wanted. And then his general attitude and emotional abusiveness kind of confirmed that in my mind. So when I was 7, I used to put the silverware away. That was one of my chores. And I remember having steak knives and having it at my chest and ready to plunge it in. And someone would walk in every time. It worked. It happened that way. Those weren't planned. Those were spur of the moment. Those were, I remember that scene. I remember that in the movie, here's a knife in my hand. Here's an opportunity. I'm going to take it. And by God's grace, someone always walked in. But when I was 10, I planned it for a while. And so I decided to walk out at recess and go in the middle of the field, and my plan was to choke myself. You can't kill yourself by choking yourself. I was 10. I didn't know that. So I walked out in my very dramatic fashion and kneeled down on the ground and started squeezing my neck as hard as I could. Some of the kids playing, this was in elementary school, some of the kids were playing, they came and they started pulling my arms off and took me to the principal's office. My parents never found out about it. I think it's because of the conversation I had with my principal. He wasn't a happy man, and I had been in his office a few times. In 4th grade, they had found some bruises on me, called social services. Social service showed up at my house. My parents said, oh, she's dramatic. She does things for attention. She's a kid. She fell down. It's nothing. My stepmom was a bit eccentric, and when she was high, would hallucinate things. And she got it into her head that I was stealing things from people at school. And so she would just randomly go into my room with a box and start going through my toy box or my closet or my shoes or whatever and say, hold up a toy and say, look, that says so-and-so on here. You stole this from so-and-so. And it wouldn't say anything on there, but she would just kind of hallucinate this and get it in her head, put it in a box, go to my school, have that kid called out of class and hand them the stuff and say, here's your stuff. That didn't help with the bullying. I then had angry kids coming up to me telling me to keep my crazy mom away from them. So he was familiar with our family, and I think that's part of his reaction. But he sat me down and he said, Sarah, what are you doing? And I said, I'm trying to kill myself. What do you think I'm doing? And he said, well, you're kind of dumb because you can't kill yourself that way. You'll pass out, your hands will relax, and you'll start breathing again. And then I replied to him, well, wow, we just told a kid who wants to kill himself they're too stupid to do it. My parents never found out. So I think it's because of that conversation. I also think it's because of God's grace, because if my parents found out, I probably would have been in a lot of trouble. And they wouldn't have taken it serious. Everything I did was for attention. So that was just kind of how it was. And that was my first experience. After that, when I was 11, I officially gave my life to the Lord, which was kind of interesting. It's kind of a strange way to say it because that first girlfriend I told you about, when she left, my dad introduced her to someone he knew at work, and they ended up getting married. And it turned out they had both been believers when they were young and had fallen away. And then when they got married, went to marriage counseling, and they just gave their lives to Christ again, and they became Christians, and they came and picked me up and took me to church every Sunday. So God very graciously always made himself known in my life. I mean, I look back and I know there's abuse, and I know there's a lot of hard, hurtful moments, but God was always there, and he showed up in little ways, and he protected me from myself. And even when I was 7, she had noticed bruises on me, and she was close with my grandma, my dad's mom, and she took some pictures and she sent them to my grandmother. And my grandmother's response was, we don't talk about family dirty laundry. It's mind your own business. So she knew she wasn't going to get any help there, and she was afraid to call social services because she didn't know what would happen to me at that point. So she just continued to pray for me. Well, her husband was a very quiet man. He was not a man of a lot of words, and he said, you know what, Sarah, we're not going to have a nap time today. I'm just going to read you a story. And he took and he read the book of Job to me, the entire book of Job. He looked at me And he said, I don't know why this is happening. I'm not even going to try and explain it and give you an excuse or a reason. But I do know that God loves you and he has a plan for you. And just like these bad things happened to Job, you have to trust in him and know that he's going to take care of you in the end. And that stuck with me. I clung to that. And so when I say I gave my life to the Lord when I was 11, I officially prayed the prayer when I was 11. But I can't think of a time in my life where I didn't know God's presence was there and that he loved me. When I became a Christian and prayed the prayer, I realized that I was a sinner in need of a Savior. I also decided I was done with what was going on at home. And I knew that drugs were illegal, and I knew that I could get out of my house by turning my parents into the police for drugs. I didn't put two and two together that the abuse might be related to the drugs. I just knew the drugs were illegal, and that was my ticket out of there. So I ran away from home, and I went to the police, and I said, my parents do drugs. And they said, okay. They called my parents, and they said, do you do drugs? And they said, no, she got a bad grade at school. She's just, wanting attention. They sent me home. So I decided next time I was going to have to be smarter about it, and I waited. And I ran away again, and this time I wasn't going to go to the police, I was just going to run away. And so I'm wandering the streets of Pico Rivera, which was like not the smartest thing to do at all. It's not the best neighborhood. Yeah. So I was wandering around, it was getting dark, and I was getting hungry. And I noticed this house had a light on, and I knocked on the door and asked if I could use their phone. I was going to call a friend of mine whose parents were aware of the situation at home, and I thought maybe I could sleep at their house that night because they didn't really like my parents, and they joked that they were going to use me as an extra dependent on their tax return because I was over there so much, and so I figured they would be okay with coming and getting me. And so I went in and I called, and the lady says, yeah, sure, and she made me a hamburger, and she's talking to me. I didn't know her husband worked for the police department. He was a dispatcher, a 911 dispatcher, and so he was in the back talking to the police department. I had no idea. She's like, yeah, your friends can come get you. You'll be fine. We'll take care of you. Here's some food. And then all of a sudden, a big, huge police officer showed up, and he was, running away is illegal. Yes, and he said, I'm taking you back to your house. We got in the car, and I said, you can take me back, but you're just going to see me again in 2 weeks. I'm not staying there. And he said, what's going on? And I said, they do drugs. And he said, well, can you prove it? And I said, sure. So we got to the house. I walked into the house, grabbed all of their stuff, their mirrors, their cocaine. I just brought it all out. And they arrested my dad right there in front of me. And he looked at me, and he just looked at, I could tell by his face, he felt so incredibly betrayed. And I remember thinking, I can't feel anything towards him right now, because if I do, I'm going to stop. And I will not survive if I stay in this house. So I continued to gather the evidence against him, and they arrested him and took him away. And I went into foster care. They called my mom, who I hadn't seen since I was 10 months old, or heard from. I went to live with her, and that lasted about 2 months, and she asked me to leave. She's a very nice lady. She just didn't know how to handle responsibility and conflict, and couldn't handle the broken relationship and how to deal with that. So then I moved to my dad's parents, where my grandmother arranged for me to move back in with my dad because she was not having any of this airing the dirty laundry. And I ended up back with my dad and had to testify against him in court again and leave again when I was 13. And I went into a group home where my dad's ex-girlfriend, the one I told you about, her mom got a foster license so I could live with her, which was wonderful, and I thought, this is it, we're good. It had been so crazy and so hectic during that time, I did not have any attempts. I was just trying to keep moving, didn't stop long enough to think about anything. Once I got to my Nana's house, that's what I called her, my Nana, and I started going to school and things settled in, the thoughts started coming back. The depression and the worthlessness, the feeling of worthlessness. And I tried to overdose on some medication. I started cutting myself with razors, and I realized that when I was doing those things, and like I said, remember I talked about pigeonholing? When I was doing those things, when I was trying to overdose on medication, or when I was trying to cut myself, my therapist helped me understand that I wasn't really trying to die. I was trying to wave a flag and a banner and say, hey, look, I'm hurting here, and you may not be able to see it by looking at you, but if I have this big cut on my arm, then you're going to see that, and you're going to see that I'm injured, and maybe you'll realize that there's more to it than that. And when I'm trying to heal myself, I'm trying to get out of the tornado of the emotion and make it stop, and the only way I can think of to make it stop is to make everything stop. And so, and at that point, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. I'm pretty sure that's what it was when I was 10. I just didn't know how to make it stop. And the only thing I could think of to make it stop was to make everything stop. And I used to, even when I was, 10, I used to lay awake on Saturday mornings because I could sleep in. And I would lay in my bed and I would fantasize different ways that I could kill myself. And then I would imagine my dad coming to the morgue and seeing my body and going, oh, I do love her. I thought maybe if I did that, then he would realize he loved me and that he wanted me. Sorry, okay. So, in 8th grade, a friend of mine introduced me to a new church. I got involved in that church. And that started a time in my life where I went from cutting myself and severe depression and taking pills and doing things like that to a time of peace. I got surrounded by some really good friends that were there for me. We were growing in our walk with the Lord, and I realized that my relationship with God was a personal relationship with God, and that it wasn't just about what I was doing, but also that I needed to pursue that and to get to know Him, the Lord, more than just this guy that rescued me all the time. And so that was what I call the peaceful years, and that happened through college, and things were going really good. I would say there was probably a good 7-year period where I didn't have any attempts. I had moments of depression and anxiety, but I started to recognize the whirlpool and the triggers, and I would call my friends and say, hey guys, I'm having a hard time, and they would say, hey, let's go out, or let me pray with you, or what are you doing? What are you watching? What are you listening to? What are you doing? And that was a really good time. And then I went to Bible college, and I met my husband. Oh no. And I have his permission to share this. But then I got married. And let me explain something. All little girls dream of their wedding, right? And they have it planned to a T. I took that to an extreme, like beyond extreme. When he met me, he used to tease me all the time that I was never going to get married because I wanted it so much. And then I married him. But that was for me, like, and I didn't realize this till later, but I looked at life as a marathon, and the finish line was marriage. And all that stuff I went through, it was okay, because someday I was going to get married. And he would never treat me the way those people treated me. He would value me. He would think I was beautiful. I would walk in the room and he would light up, and the favorite part of his day would be me. I would be perfection to him. And then I got married. and that's not what happened at all. And I sunk into a deeper depression after I got married than I ever had before. Which was ironic, because John never beat me. He never humiliated me in public. But marriage was not what I thought it was. And that was my disillusionment. And that was my putting my value and how I would value myself and how someone else valued me and how they saw me. And when we do that to another human being, we will always be disappointed. Always. We had 3 kids within 3 years in the very beginning of our marriage. So there was hormones and finances and getting to know each other, and where do you keep the toothbrush? I keep the toothbrush here. Why are you moving my toothbrush? And, you know, just fighting and getting to know each other, and that just rocked my world. I remember at one point walking out of our apartment saying, I don't even believe in God anymore. I am so done. If this is what I was waiting for and this is what happened, I am done. God does not exist. And that's because I put my hope in a man. And he's a wonderful man, and he does love me more than anyone else ever has. But he's still a man. And not just like a man, like men, like women are cool and men aren't, but like a human man. That wasn't a dig on men, that was human kind. And that leads me to, I want to talk to you guys about, well, I guess I shouldn't leave you in that spot. So I ended up, when Naomi was about 4 months old, I ended up in the hospital having overdosed on some medication and having held a butcher knife up to my neck, threatening to slice it in front of John and Maya. She was about 1.5 years. So hopefully she'll never remember that. And that's when we were, ironically, preparing to go to Kenya on a missions trip. And the reason I bring that up is because I've been a Christian and I've known God my whole life, and I believed in him, and I believed that he was true. I mean, I did struggle with that at one point for 2 hours. But I still struggle with this. And I know that there are people who are believers and they wonder, how can I be a believer and struggle like this and think these thoughts? And I just want to encourage you that it happens. And it doesn't mean you're not a believer. Well, then I went off my notes a little. Let me gather myself for a second. Okay, so this page. Okay, so I got married and I got disillusioned, and that taught me that my soul is hungry and it is thirsty for God. And the only thing that will satisfy this, and I can say this to you guys with 100% conviction because I have been there and I have been back. The only thing that will satisfy your soul is the love and forgiveness and grace you will find in Jesus Christ. I guarantee you that. You can take me at my word on that one. And it will satisfy you beyond anything that you could ever imagine. As far as being a Christian, you guys have heard the story of Elijah, right? Well, some of you may have not, so I'll go ahead and give you a brief synopsis. So there's this guy, Elijah, in the Bible, and I don't know if it's Elijah or Elisha, it's one of them. And he's like this prophet, he's popular, and everyone in the kingdom is following this false god, and he totally, they do a challenge, and like, my God versus your God, and I'm going to call down fire from heaven, and so all the prophets of the false god come, and they're cutting themselves, and they're crying out to their God, and Elijah's totally taunting them and saying, oh, where is he? Why isn't he, sending fire from heaven? And they start yelling louder and all this stuff, and he's like, well, maybe he's going to the bathroom. Maybe he can't hear you. And he's just totally mocking these guys. And then he says one thing, and God sends fire down. Boom, it's done. Huge victory, right? Just proved God is God. So what does Elijah do? He runs away. I'll read you the verse. It's in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 4. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a juniper tree. And he requested for himself that he might die, and said, it is enough now, Lord. Take my life, for I am no better than my father's. You may doubt whether I was a believer, but I can guarantee you Elijah was a believer. He just called fire from heaven down and stood for God and had a great victory. And he wanted to die. So don't be discouraged by that if you're a believer. There's hope. I'm not going to leave the story there, but I began to really evaluate, why am I feeling this way? You know, I mean, yeah, all this stuff happened to me. I have a good reason to be depressed, right? But I was in high school and I had a teacher come to me and he was talking to us about how our outside influences influence us. And I was a teenager, as you guys are, and while I respected him and I understood him, I didn't think he really fully understand what it was to be a teenager. And so when he said, you know, your outside influences, they influence you, I was like, yeah, maybe you, but I'm a strong person, I know what I believe, and nothing's going to influence me, what I watch on TV, what I listen to, none of that's going to really affect me, come on. And so he challenged me, and he said, all right, go 2 weeks. Don't listen to music. Now, I'm going to say something, and you guys are probably going to give me confused looks. When I was in high school, I listened to alternative music. I don't know if you've ever heard that phrase or not. And I listened to bands like Nirvana. Anyone ever hear of Nirvana? Here. Okay, I listened to Stone Temple Pilots. All right, I listened to stuff like that. You know, not exactly. I know one of my favorite songs was Janie's Got a Gun, because she kills her dad. Not exactly uplifting music, right? Why did I listen to that music? Did I listen to that music to make myself depressed? No. You know why I listened to that music? Because I thought it helped me. Because someone was able to pen in words what I couldn't. And so I thought by listening to that, that would help me. And that would encourage me, because someone else out there knows how I feel. So I surrounded myself with it. So I thought my teacher was crazy. I'm like, no, these things help me. So I stopped for 2 weeks. I said, fine, I'll take your challenge. And an amazing thing happened. I was happier. And not only did I stop listening to that music, I started filling that time with listening to Christian music. And I gotta say this to you guys, okay? When I was in high school, Christian music, we had like 5 bands. And they all sounded the same. And they're all out on tour now, too, ironically, new singers. But you guys have like way more selection than I did. And as far as your style of music, I guarantee you, whatever style your music is, if it's someone screaming in a microphone, I can find you a Christian band that screams in the microphone and it sounds good. So don't use style as an excuse. That doesn't work. If I can do it, you guys can do it. And if you don't believe me, I want you guys to do the same challenge. So I stopped listening to this music for 2 weeks and I noticed a difference. I replaced it with Christian music and all of a sudden I was feeling more uplifted. I was reading my Bible more. And I thought, well, okay, that's interesting. Okay, so he had a point. All right, made a difference. So then after the 2 weeks were over, I started listening to my own music again, right? Because I mean, yeah, it made a difference, but it wasn't like life-shattering or anything. And all of a sudden, like I put up these things with cold water and I went, what? What are they saying? That's a lie. That's not true. And it shocked me because I wasn't numb to it anymore. And I found plenty in the Bible. You know, I listened to that music and I said, well, they identify with me. They identify with the hurt. I guarantee you, I can find scripture in here that's going to identify with your hurt. I guarantee you. You don't believe me. I also can find music that will encourage you. Because I know as a teenager, even now, I mean, if you come over our house, there's probably music on. I just love music. I can't sing and I can't play an instrument, but I love music. It really does. And like, yeah. So if you're up to the challenge, I'd like to challenge you guys to do that for 2 weeks. I'll even make a CD for you. Tell me what kind of music you like. I will have my DJ get you the music, and he will make a CD for you. And I also, for anyone who wants some verses, some encouragement, I have like a ton of them written down, and I didn't want to go over all of them tonight because we're limited in time, but I will give them to you because I promise you it's in there. And then you can have that as encouragement when you're feeling down. So let me... if you want something to read that helps you express your sadness, it's in the Bible a lot. And the difference between that and what the world offers is that it always offers hope in the end. It doesn't leave you in your sorrow. It acknowledges deep pain, but it doesn't stop there. It leads you to the great physician, the healer of your soul. And I want to read you guys one of my life verses in Psalm 40, just as an example. It says, I waited patiently for the Lord, and he inclined to me, and he heard my cry. He brought me out of the pit of destruction and out of the miry clay. He set my feet upon a rock, making my footsteps firm. He put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise to our God. Many will see and fear and will trust in the Lord. How blessed is the man who has made the Lord his trust and has not turned to the proud nor to those who lapse into falsehood. Many, O Lord my God, are the wonders which you have done, and your thoughts towards us. There is none to compare to you. And I'll stop there. The whole verse is really good. You should look it up afterwards. But that's kind of been one of my life verses, because God did. He took me out of a pit. I'm dropping the tissue everywhere. He took me out of a very sticky pit. And my heart is breaking for this generation, because when I was in high school, like, there was one suicide a year, maybe. And maybe we just talk about it more because we have Facebook and we have media and we have all of that. But correct me if I'm wrong on this, but last year in Rochester, I think there was at least 3 suicides in high school, if not 4. It's increasing. And we have an enemy, and he wants to destroy you. The Bible talks about in John 10:10 that he seeks to steal, kill, and destroy. And he wants to kill your hope and steal your joy and destroy your soul. And what better way to destroy your soul than convince you to take your own life and that you're worthless? And the ironic thing is, we welcome them in the door. We surround ourselves in the message that we are worthless and that no one wants us. And we drown in those thoughts, and we plaster them on our walls and posters, and we fill our minds with those lies. And we wonder why we're left a heap on the floor wanting to take our life, because we're believing a lie. And we surround ourselves and we wrap ourselves in it like a blanket and say that that helps. And all it does is further lead us to death. I've learned my triggers in depression, and I've learned to recognize the lie. And I'm not going to stand here and say that it's been a long time. I will be honest with you guys. The last time I tried to take my life, which was the scariest, it was my rock bottom moment, was a year and a half ago. And I'll tell you why it was my rock bottom moment. Because every time I did it before, I hesitated. And I thought of my kids. I thought, oh, God's going to be disappointed in me. I heard, no, Sarah, don't do this. And that time I didn't. There was none of that. And if someone hadn't been in the room, I guarantee you I wouldn't be standing here. And that was a year and a half ago, guys. I was already working with you guys. You probably had no idea it happened. The enemy is real, and he will come at you from every angle. That scared me. That scared me so much. It scared me silly. And I went, okay, this is enough. No more. Because not only is the enemy after me, but he's going to hurt other people through me. He's going to hurt my kids. He's going to hurt my husband. He's going to hurt you guys. I'm not going to allow that. I'm going to recognize a lie for what it is. I can feel when it's coming. I can feel when depression is coming. And if you struggle with depression on a regular basis, you typically know it's kind of a shadow in the back of your head. And you have a choice at that point. You have a choice to stand up and say, I know what this is. This is not real. And I'm not going to wallow. I'm not going to go in that whirlpool. I'm going to say no. I'm going to tell someone. I'm going to pray. I'm going to talk to someone. I'm going to get counseling. You don't have to be on medication to get counseling. You don't have to have a chemical imbalance to get counseling. It's not a label. It doesn't make you less of a person. The Bible says we're supposed to do it on multiple occasions. You're not created to be alone. Don't make yourself alone. It's another trick of the enemy. All right. So, I want to talk to you, those of you who don't struggle with depression. Because someday you're going to meet someone who does. And you probably, if you're like most people who don't struggle with depression, you're like, I don't get it. Or you look at someone and, I don't get it. Why would they be struggling with depression? They have a good family, they have a good home, yada yada, blah blah. It's not logical. It makes no sense, really. And I want to help you understand. I want to help you understand how to deal in what you do with someone who is. If you run into someone, if a friend comes to you and they're like, hey, you know what, I'm really struggling with depression, you're like, oh, geez, I have no idea what that's like. What am I supposed to do? Okay? Don't freak out, for one. Always refer them to some counseling, to an adult. But also, I had a conversation with John one time. I was trying to explain to him, and he's a very logical person. He's a black and white, and if, why? I don't get it. He would tell me, I don't get it. Why do you think this way? Because I would tell him, I'm a horrible wife, I'm a horrible mother, I shouldn't be here, I should take my life so that you can remarry the woman you deserve, the kids can have a good mother, just all of those things. And he would look at me and he would just be like, what is wrong with you? That's not true, you're crazy. And things like, well, he wouldn't say you're crazy, he'd never say you're crazy, but he didn't get it. And I remember one day we were having this conversation and I think it finally clicked with him. And I said, okay, I hear you, and there is a small fraction of me that believes that. And if you struggle with depression and suicidal thoughts, there is a small fraction of you that believes that you are worthy and that you are worth something and you are valuable because you're still here. If you didn't believe that, if there was any part of you that didn't believe that, even just a smidge, you wouldn't be here. So if you are, then you do have that. And I told him, I said, it's like you're in this room and it's incredibly dark. Like when you're a kid and your parents turn the lights off and that's just your teddy bear in the closet, but it does not look like your teddy bear in the closet. And everything in you tells you that is not a teddy bear. That is a scary, scary monster. And your brain's going, no, you saw it before you turned the light off. It is just a teddy bear. Okay, it's kind of that kind of a struggle, only a lot thicker. And I said, honey, I am in so much darkness. And when you come to me and tell me that, why would you think that way? You confirm the darkness. You confirm that I am too dumb to even figure this out, which pushes me further in it. So when you talk to somebody who's depressed, and you talk to someone who's having suicidal thoughts, what you need to do is you need to take that small light, that hope they have, because if they're talking to you, they have hope. If they're here, they have hope. It is buried down deep inside, and it is hard for them to see, but deep down inside, they are screaming for someone to tell them that the hope is real and the darkness isn't. Even though it is like 99.9% darkness and teeny tiny little hope, they need someone to say, no, the hope is what's real, the rest of it isn't. So I'm going to give you guys an illustration, and we're going to turn the lights off, all of them, and we're going to stay here in the dark. Because this is the closest I can help you to feel what it is to be depressed. Because you know what, darkness, you can't hold it, right? It's just there, but it's thick and it's heavy. So we're going to turn off all of the lights and we're just going to sit here in silence. We're going to do a couple things now. There's a light in the back of the room. And that light is symbolic of hope. And it's not as dark in here as I want because the sun isn't gone yet. But if you're struggling in depression or suicidal thoughts, or you know someone who is, I'm going to ask you to stand with me by lighting a candle. They're all over. And that's going to signal that hope, you're going to help that hope grow for somebody, or you're going to cling to that hope and you're going to acknowledge that it's true. And you're going to believe in that. And the light of Christ will grow. We're going to play a song, a video during this time, and you guys are free to go light candles as you want. We also are leaders, and some counselors are here if anybody needs to talk with somebody. I just scratched the surface today, and I realized I may have just ripped open a scab. And that's okay. There's people here to help. So, as you feel led, go ahead and light a candle.